Okay, today's daf has nothing to do with Masechta Nazir. The Mishnah in Naziris discuss if a guy said, "I want to be a Nazir, and I want to pay for the carbon of another individual," and another person said, "I want to be Megaleach, I want to pay for the carbon of an individual," and we said if they're smart guys, they'll meet together, and each one will bring each other's carbon, so they'll only have to bring one set rather than two. That was the Mishnah. Now, our Gemara digresses to discuss, I'd say, two Shas sugyas, and one of the most difficult sugyas in Shas. Okay? So the first digression is going to be, if a man sends a shliach to Makadosh and Isha, he dies, the guy can't marry anyone in the world because maybe he's going to be marrying one of the kroivim that is chayiv karas and Mrs. Bezin for. That's din number one. That's the first digression. The second digression, the second Shas sugya, is the famous sugya that we've come across many times, is the sugya of roiv, right? We know that you have 9 butcher shops in the city, and the 10th one sells kosher meat. Where do you find the meat? If you find the meat in the store, in other words, the suffix arose in the kavua, in a place that's set, kol kavua kemerza merza. If the suffix arises outside, then we'll say kol de parish, merua parish, anything that's separated from the parish. That is the two Shas sugyas that we know, one more famous than the next. And then we have our favorite Masechta Kinim. In case you forgot, there's a Masechta that discusses birds. Okay, here's the background for those people who never learned it, or people that might have forgotten. A Zav or Yoledes brings karbonis, they bring birds. They would go ahead, and there's 2 ways to go ahead. They have to bring 2 birds. One is the chatas, one is an oila. The oila sa'oif is performed above the red line. The chatas sa'oif is performed below the red line. So they perform different ways. In addition, there's only 2 times you can go ahead and designate the which is which. Either b'shas lakicha, the owner, when he buys the kan, when he buys the cane, we say kan, but it's cane. They buy the nest, or the kohen b'shas, he does it. If you go ahead and the owner goes ahead and designates it, it's called kan mifureshes. So one's a chatas and one's an oila. If he buys it and he doesn't designate, then it's called a kan stam. It's called a stuma. One is an oila and one is a chatas. We don't know which one is what. Whichever one is. Okay. With that in mind, let's begin. Those 3 things. Says we're up to Yud Aleph Amid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Amr Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, named Rabbi Yochanan. If a man would say to a shliach, say v'kadesh li isha stam. He doesn't say, go get me isha plainis. If he would say isha plainis, then he would be only usher and her relatives. But here's the key. He said stam in anisha, and the aleph is very important. Bach, guys, says the Bach, umeis hashliach, and the shliach dies. Umeis hashliach, and the shliach dies. Then asher b'chol hanashim sheba olam. He's asher on all the women in the world. Chazaka shliach oisa shlichusay. Now, let's go through the sugya, and I'll get back to some of the innate problems in this daf. It's really a shas sugya. We had it in Gittin Samech Dalet, but let's just develop what the problem is, and then we'll go into the different nuances of the daf itself. So he's not. What's the problem? You don't know he's Mekadesh, and therefore any woman that you go ahead and a Mekadesh might be one of the relatives. And we know an Erva is Asa. It could be an Issachar, it can be worse than that, it can be Isa Mrs. Bezdin, but it's Asa. So therefore, you would not be able to go ahead and be Mekadesh and Isha, because we have a Chazaka that before he died, he in fact did a Shlichus and was Mekadesh a certain Isha. The Kivin like Pirishle, since we didn't say who he was Mekadesh, Layoda Hainiu Kadesh, we don't know who he was Mekadesh to. That's what it says, okay? That's what it says. Now, we know in the world, guys, that there's a din l'chayr of roiv. There's a din of roiv. So if you go after roiv, Pasha should say that he should be able to go ahead and be Mekadesh and Isha, Because Roiv says that the Ish is Mekadesh is not one of the Kroivim of this possible woman that is Mekadesh. And we know a man can be married to more than two women, so it's not a problem. So l'chayra, why don't we go after Roiv? Says the Gemara, Esivei. Esivei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Again, Rabbi Yochanan said this din, that he can't marry any woman in the world. Says Rabbi Yochanan, one second. Kan stuma. Now, I don't know why he had to bring this case in to ask the kasha. You could have asked the kasha directly from Roiv. You could have asked the kasha from butcher shops, but nonetheless, to make the Gemara more interesting, we bring in Masech Kinim, which when I hear that word, I begin to shudder and think about. I get the shakes, even though it's only a few blot. Anyway, so Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, kan stuma, a kan meaning that he didn't go ahead and explain. He didn't go and explain what's a chatas, what's an oily. It's two birds. They're carbonis, but we don't know which one is a carbon. Which one is what? Sheparcha, that it went ahead and it flew the coop. Literally flew the coop. The bird flew the coop. Sheparcha goizel echa mehem la'avra oilam. It left. Oisha parcha lebein chatas hamesos. Or we know, guys, this halacha Moshe Sinai, that there are 5 chatas shemesos, right? Tmuras chatas, vlad chatas, chatas shekipper baleha, chata shemesa baleha, chata avashnasa. So therefore, they all die, and this bird falls into that category. So it flies in there. Oishemes echa mehem, or one of them dies. So now you have one bird left over. This is not important, guys. You have one bird left over. Now, since you didn't designate, you can just bring another bird. In other words, this other bird is obviously out, wherever it is. You don't have it. So wherever it is, it's a carbon. It was mukdish for an individual. He bought it for hegdish, and we don't know which carbon it is, whether it's a chatas or it's an oila, right? But definitely it has kedusha, and it flew the coop. And now you have one extra bird. What could you do? Yikach zug l'shein. You bring a second bird for that leftover one. Okay. Now the ilu kamifureshes, and if it was a kamifureshes, meaning one of the birds was a chatas and one was an oila and one flew the coop, ein loy takana. You have no takana because you don't know which one flew the coop. So you can't bring an oila. Maybe the one that you have is an oila. You can't bring a chatas. Maybe the remaining bird is a chatas. This has nothing whatsoever to do with the sugya. This is not so far nothing whatsoever to do with the sugya, right? So what do we have? We have a bird that was kaddish. It flew the coop. You could replace it. That's all we know right now. You don't have a question at all yet. The ilu shar kinim ba'alma, right? Mitakna. Any kan. In other words, let's say now someone else is a zav. He can buy a kan. Correct? And what are we not worried about? That kan is going to be one of the birds that flew the coop. You're not worried that, in other words, let's say I needed 2 birds and one flies the coop. Heshi needs 2 birds. Heshi can go ahead and buy a set of birds. But one second, aren't we worried that one of those birds is my bird and he can't bring my carbon? That carbon was designated for me. He can't bring it. Why aren't we worried about that? Just like you're worried that what? That you're not, just like you're not worried that the bird that Hesh is going to bring is that bird, so too, why are you worried that the woman that you're Mekadesh is one of the Kroivim? In other words, that's the kasha. As far-fetched as it is, that's the kasha. Again, we'll go to the nuances in a second. Good? So again, what? We have a sugi. Rabbi Yochanan made a statement. Said Rabbi Yochanan, if a man tells a shliach, go be Mekadesh me anisha stam, the shliach dies. We have a chazaki, he did a shlichus. This man can't marry anyone in the world because maybe he's going to marry one of the Kroivim. Not the woman itself. The woman itself, pashtus. You could ask whether she was kabel kedushin. Okay. Anyway, but so says the Gemara. Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, why is this the case? I have a case of kan sipor. Basically, let's skip to the chase. I have 2 birds. They belong to Eliezer Stern. They're kaddish. They're not designated. They fly the coop. Any person in the world, Heshi, Kenny, Aryeh, can go ahead, buy a kan, and we're not worried that one of those birds was my bird and they can't bring it. So why are you worried about Anisha? That's the kasha. Says the Gemara, right? Let's say maybe that bird is the bird that flew the coop, my bird. So that's the kasha that Reish Lakish is Rabbi Yochanan. So Amalei, K'imna ana isha deloy naida. I went ahead and said the din of a woman that doesn't move. Pirish, says the Mefarish, kol kfuda bas melech penima. A woman, where is the suffix going to rise of Kedushin? The suffix was that you Makadosh where? In the house. So your suffix arose in a house. It arose in a makam kavua, similar to the meat where being found in the butcher shop. Good? But Amit Li, and you tell me at Isur Denaidi, and you tell me you're asking from Kansipor where the bird flew the coop, and the suffix is arising after it left its place, after the meat left the butcher shop, right? What will you say? Hachanami Naidi, maybe he was what? Maybe he found her in the street and he was Makadosh in the street. So the suffix arose in the street, right? Maybe that's the case where the suffix arose in the street, and therefore what? It would be called the parish Meruba parish, and nonetheless, Rabbi Yochanan says what? It's also Chasam Hadra Linichusa. There, she's going to go back to her place. Women's place is in the house. She's going to go back into the house. Gabi Khan Mihadra, by a Khan, does it go back? So therefore that's the kasha, that's the teretz. Okay, let's go through it again. Rabbi Yochanan says a din. A man is Mekadosh and Isha Stam. He's usher on all the women in the world. Why? Because maybe she is what? She is one of the kroivim. Beishakash has the kasha by birds when it flies the coop. Another person can buy a set of birds and we're not worried that it's what? That's the bird that flew the coop that was designated for another individual. Answers the Gemara, there's a difference between the suffix when it arose in a makam kavua or a suffix that rose in a makam in the street. So by the bird, it rose in the street, therefore it's sveikas. Therefore, we don't go after roiv, because called the parish, we go after roiv, but the roiv and the birds in the world do not belong to Lezer Stern. But Mashen came by the Isha, right? Mashen came by the Isha, will say that what? Since it rose from makam kavua, because kol kavua the penima, kol kavua kemech samech. Okay, you got the kasha, you got the teretz. Let's go see Tosfos says something very interesting things here, guys. The first Tosfos on the page. Asa b'chol nashim sheba olam. V'im toimar. The kuli alma yesru lisa nashim. The shem ezoisi sheniskat shal yidei shliach. Every person should be asa to marry. Maybe this is the woman that the shliach was mekadosh to. In other words, according to so the kasha is a woman's not believed to say that she is not mekudeshes, but Rabbi Tam says who she is believed. So Tainach, that would be gedolos. Katanas sheni does, but Katanas they don't know if their father kibul avur kedushim ayek lemeimar ukvar meis avia. So in other words, you have another problem. Forget about this individual that made the mishaleach. Every man should be asa. Guys, if you're going after roiv, and the kavu is mechza, so no person should be able to marry any woman. Yesh Midaraisa afilu hushari Lisa. Really, midaraisa, this guy can get married. That's lina basaruba. Milaymar mikroives hamikdashasi. In other words, midaraisa, this guy's really able to get married. This that we don't let him get married, the iu ela kinasa ba'alma, and him alone shasa shliach stam v'lei pirishlei kadosh leplainis ulidei kansu ulachrina lei kansu. In other words, this is very far fetched. Really, midaraisa, you will be able to get married. The reason why we don't let this guy marry, we cancel him, because no person should set himself up for such a horrible suffix that what? By not designating a woman. Okay, go find me an Isha. Go find me an Isha, and you know what? And fine. No, by him doing that, we're going to cancel him. Masha'enkein, any other man in the world, we're going to say you can go ahead and marry. The Knas doesn't apply to them. That's the first shot in Tosfos why any person is able to get married. Vim toima frek Tosfos the second kasha. Ulahavi sur deraisa. Forget. How can you say it's the Rabbanon? To have like kfua v'chol kfua k'mech samech tzadami. The Gemara in Chulin learns out from a pasuk that kol kfua k'mech samech is a din deraisa. In other words, basically, guys, if you go after roiv, everything should be kosher. You always go after roiv. The din of kol kavua is k'mech samech is the deraisa. So if you're telling me that the Isha, that the Kedushin took place in the house, why do you say it's a din derabanan? It should be a din deraisa. Guys, you hear the kasha. Guys, very powerful kasha. If the din of kol kavua kemerza mechzadami is a din deraisa, why taka can anyone get married? If the suffix arose in the house, you should not be able to get married. Every woman should blind a suffix 50-50, and 50-50 is not a roiv. And for Tosfos, this is an interesting teretz. V'yeshleimar, the lo yamirin kavua kemertzadami elikisha isa nikola atzmai, v'ahetel nikola atzmai. You have two pieces of meat. You can recognize that this one's treif and this one's not, right? Then you say kavua avol kisha ena isa nikola atzmai lo yamirin kavua. When the is not recognizable by itself, as this woman is not recognizable by herself, you would not say kol kavua. Okay, so just basically, I just wanted to give you a time of the problems over here. There are more unique problems. Again, we have nothing to do with our kasha and teretz. We got the kasha, we got the teretz. We don't have an idea yet what this has to do with Masech Nazir. Not ki hu zeh, we don't have an idea. Certainly not with our Mishnah. We don't have any idea. But right now, regarding the din of kol kavua kemetza metzadami, there's a yisai to know that's only when the is nikolei ad atzmai loit rabbeinu tam. This din that you can't get married is only a din stam, and therefore would only apply to that individual. It would not apply to it would not apply to a person that any other person. Amar Rava, going back on the din, umayda Rabbi Yochanan, again, just not part of the kasha whatsoever, just a further understanding of this difficult concept. And Rabbi Yochanan says you're also to marry all the women in the world. Umayda Rabbi Yochanan, be'isha she'ein la loy bas. She doesn't have a daughter, so you don't have to worry about a mother-in-law. Loy bas, loy bas bas, or or bas bas, loy bas ben. These are all these surim. Loy aim, loy aches. In all these cases, Rabbi Yochanan would be maida, if these women don't exist, you will be able to get married because there's no karev. And even if the sister she has a sister and she got divorced. So in other words, guys, here's the case. A guy makes a shliach on April 1st. April 1st, the sister's married. Now, the guy takes a day to get to a certain land, and the woman gets divorced. So the possibility exists that he was mekadesh the sister, right? So now you have a woman and a sister in the world, a karev in the world. Nonetheless, since at the time of minei shlichus, when you appointed the shliach, this woman was not available because she was an eshes ish. In that case, Rabbi Yochanan would be maida that he can get married. Now, who had din? Not only the Rishonim speak out, not only this woman, but anyone. In other words, if all of the relatives of this woman that you want to get married to were married at the time of Kiddushin, no, you can check it out. I want to marry Rachel. Check out Rachel's mother, check out Rachel's sister, check out Rachel's grandmother. You go ahead, you check out everyone, right? And you find that they're available, they were Mekudeshes, then you would be able to get married. That's Rabbi Yochanan will be moided to that. Good? Now, my timer, what's the reason? Why would the woman be mutter? That he shaita the Kamalei having the Sivna Legavre, in the time when he appointed him a shliach, she was married to somebody. Kimashva shliach b'milsa de kaima kamei. It's something that's available to him. B'milsa de loy kaimi kamei, and something that's not available to him, loy mashva shliach. So we have a svara that a person only has in mind that who's available. So now, right now, guys, we don't know it's a din in shlichus. We say it's a svara. That a svara would state that a guy, when he goes ahead and makes a shliach, he has in mind something that's available. It would have to be something that's available. Okay, this is what we have to know for our tzushtel to Naziris. So again, when did Rabbi Yochanan say you can marry any woman in the world? That's when the relatives were all available. If the relatives weren't available, either because they were not in the world, there were no such relatives, or they were married, in that case, Rabbi Yochanan would be maida. Why? Because there's a svara, when this guy made a shliach, he only had in mind people who were available, and at this time, the svara says they weren't available. Okay, that's Rav's din, and that's going to be the tzushtel to our Mishnah. Says I can't take credits. I can't. No questions tonight. Tanan, Hareini Nazir v'olay legaleach. A guy says, I'm a Nazir, and it's upon me to provide korbanos for another Nazir. So right now, this guy's got to bring 2 sets of korbanos, 1 for himself, and 2 for what? For another Nazir. And v'shama chaveiroi, and his friend hears, v'amar v'ani v'alayla galeach Nazir. I also want to be a Nazir, and I also want to pay for the korbanos of another Nazir. So each one is mechuyev 2 sets of korbanos, independently, their own, and for another Nazir. So im hoyu pikchim, if they're bright guys, migalchin zeh ezeh, then they go ahead and provide korbanos for each other. Like this, they'll only have to bring 1 set. I'm bringing for you, you're bringing for me. So therefore, we accomplished both. We both brought our korbanos, and we both brought from somebody else. That was our Mishnah. What does that have to do with Rabbi's din that a person doesn't make a shliach unless the person's available? V'im lav migalchin nizarim acher. If they're not pikrim, then they're going to have to buy another set of korbanos for another nazir. Now, Bishlema Basra, the latter Nazir who said, when he heard the first guy, and he said, Ani v'alayla galeach ika kadma kamei. You have the first one in front of him. So he knows what he's talking about. Ela kadma, the first guy, mi ika basra kamei. How is the first guy able to bring korbanos for the second guy? At the time he said, I'll bring korbanos, this guy wasn't a Nazir. In other words, just like you're telling me that you don't have to worry about women who weren't available because you don't have that in mind, this person also couldn't have had in mind this other Nazir because as of yet, the person was a Nazir. That's the kasha. That's what we're bringing in this whole Torah for. One more time. By woman, if the woman wasn't available, the Svara says that the shliach wasn't made a shliach to go for these things. In other words, the Svara, that if he doesn't have it in mind, the Mishaleach does not have in mind other women. So who are din by Nazir, the Nazir does not have in mind other Nazirim that are not there in the world yet. So just like this woman was an Eshes Ish, this guy wasn't a Nazir yet. The second guy wasn't a Nazir till he said Ani, right? So therefore, how could it be? That's the Tushtal of the Gemara. Mi merchak tavi lachma. Mamish from left field. Anyway, Amid Beis, Elahachi Kamar. This is what he was telling him. Imishkachina dahavi Nazir, if you find that what is a Nazir, a galche. So therefore, what? If you find a Nazir, I will go ahead what and provide the korbanos for him. Hachanami here too as well by Rabbi Yochanan's din that Rabbi says he's made to. Hachin kamalei imishkachas the megarsha. If you find the woman divorced, kaddishli be mekadesh for me. In other words, you see at the time of the Kabbalah, it's lav dafka. What do we say? When the guy said, I'll go ahead and provide korbanos for another Nazir, even if he's not another Nazir now, I'll provide korbanos for him. So who adin by the Mishaleach for Kedushin, even though she's not available now, as long as she's available later, the Kedushin should be Chal, and Rabbi Yochanan should say that he's also on all the women in the world. One more time. It's a very, very good sushtel. You, Rabbi Yochanan, Rava wanted a taina in Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yochanan is Maida, that Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan would be Maida, that if the man has no, if the woman has no kroivim, or the kroivim were unavailable at the time of the shlichus, that you would be able to get married because he didn't have it in mind. And if you don't have something in mind, the svara is that you didn't appoint a shliach for that. That's the svara. Now, if you tell me that's true, I don't understand our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah, clearly the first guy can't have in mind the second guy because the second guy is not around yet. He's not a Nazir yet. Ella, what do you have to say when he said Alayla Galeach? Not only someone who's presently a Nazir, but even somebody who will be a Nazir. And therefore he can bring the carbon for the second guy. So who had din? The svara should be that when he made him a shliach to get married, even if the woman's not available now, just like there's no, the second guy wasn't a shliach then, who had din, he would be able to go ahead and be Mekadesh. Why? After she's available, just like the Nazir becomes available later on. That's the kasha. Okay, what's the teretz? And for the Gemara, Amri, the Bnei Yeshiva say Amri. They say loy mashve in shliach el b'mulsa de matzi avid hashta. B'mulsa loy matzi avid hashta loy mashve shliach. In other words, we thought until now it was a svara. There's a svara that a person is megala das that he doesn't have in mind somebody's not available. You're not saying it's a svara, guys. You're saying it's a din. It's a din in shlichus. We're telling me a chiddush in shlichus. When a person's mimana a shliach, it has to be that he right now could marry this woman. And if not, he can't be mimana a shliach on that. So over here by Kiddushin, since you can't go ahead and marry this woman, even though she comes available later, the shliach was not made a shliach for that. So if he was Mekadesh her, it would be chal. There would be no Kiddushin. That's the key. Key to the sugi, guys, like the rush. Since you weren't appointed a shliach for this particular woman because she wasn't available, if you were Mekadesh her when she is available, it's not good Kiddushin. It's not good Kiddushin. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan Rava says Rabbi Yochanan is correct in saying that he would be able to marry any woman in the world as long as the kroivim were not available at the time of the potential Kiddushin. So it's not a svara, but it's a din. It's a din in shlichus. The Gemara here on Daf Yud Beis in Masechet Nazir is telling us he is soid in shlichus, that something that you yourself do now, a shliach can't do for you, even if it's a possibility to do later. Even if it's a possibility to do later. Okay? Kameya, what was your question?
I'm confused because I'm missing something. Isn't Rav Yochanan's din that he's not allowed to marry any woman because he doesn't know who the shliach may have married to? How can you differentiate about her kroivim? You don't even know who the woman is.
No, the woman would be believed to say that I was Mekadesh. She would believe, she would be believed to say I accepted Kiddushin from a shliach.
I mean, the woman comes forward and reveals herself.
If you're Niskadashti, right?
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, now getting the Yisoid, taking that Yisoid, guys. What's the Yisoid? A shliach can't do something that the mishalech can't do. Correct, guys? Let's put in the terms. A shliach can't do something that the mishalech can't do. What happens if I can prove to you that the shliach could do something that the Mishalech couldn't do? I'll prove it to you, okay? Now this Gemara we had recently, and I think Bez Hashem, many of you should remember it. We had it not too long ago, within the last month. We had it within the last month. So the statute of limitations on Daf Yomi for last month are in effect, okay? Veloy, guys, veloy, meaning you mean to tell me a shliach can't do something the Mishalech can't do, right? I'll show you a shliach could do something the Mishalech can't do. The guy says to his head honcho, Shaloi, Kol Nidorim Shetida Ishti, all Nidorim that my wife make, Mikan from now, At She'ovoi until I come, Memakam Pliny, Hafarla, you should take off for Hafarla. In other words, my wife is in a certain place. I'm not available. I'm making you available to take off on Nidorim. I'm making you a shliach to take off on Nidorim. I might think, what you could take them off. Tamad loymar, isha yikimenu beisha yifrirenu. Isha yikimenu, isha yifrirenu. Her man is mekayim the nether. Her man takes off the nether. Divrei Rabbi Yeshua. So, guys, it's important to point out: without a pasuk, would the shliach be able to take it off? Yes. In other words, you needed a pasuk to tell me the Torah is makbid on a man, on the husband. Without that, the shlichus would be fine. In other words, it's not a chesaron in the shlichus. It's not. It's a gezeres hakosiv that only a husband can take off the hafara, but the actual shlichus is not a problem. Rabbi Yochanan Amar mat metzinu b'chol makom sheshluchas shalom k'maisay. Not a problem. Says Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, he could be made for the neder. Why? Just like the husband could, so he could as well. Or why does he do Ishigmeni Yifrenu? The Gemara discusses in the Darim. Time in the Amar Achmana Isha Yikimenu Yishvrenu. Like Rabbi Yeshia, the reason why the shliach can't take it off, because the Torah was makbid, it should be the husband. Halav haki, if not for the Torah being makbid, apotropos mefer, that apotropos will be able to take it off. Nuts. We're asking according to Zicha, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's a good kasha, but even according to Rabbi Yeshia, it would be problematic. The ilu gabe didei. What about so now? So the shliach, guys, let's go. The shliach will be able to take it off without the pasuk? Yes. Light Rabbi Yonason, can the shliach take it off? Yes, he could take it off. So light Rabbi Yeshia, hypothetically, could take it off, and light Rabbi Yonason, in fact, he could take it off. Good. Now I'm going to prove to you that the shliach. I proved to you already the shliach can take it off, guys. Step one, I proved to you the shliach can take it off. Now I'm going to prove to you that the husband can. That the husband can. So you can have something that the husband can't do, but the shliach could do, and that's going to destroy Rav's din in Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Gemara, the ilu gabe didei, regarding the husband, Tanya, someone would say, Kol nidarim shetiduri mikan vad she'avo mimakom ploini, all nidarim that you make from mikan until I come from place so and so, yekayomim le'yamaklum. No person. You never know what she's going to say. It could be that you don't want to be making the neder. Therefore, le'yom klum. Everyone agrees that this is not a good statement. However, if he says harihe mufarin, if he says any neder that you make should be mefer. Now we have machloikis. Rebbe Eliezer oimer mufar. Rebbe Eliezer says it's mufar. Guys, I remember the lashon. The chiddush here is he's being meif in the dorim that didn't take place yet. Guys, the chiddush over here was he's being meif in the dorim that weren't in the world yet. That was the chiddush over here. Even though she didn't make them yet, he could take it off with chiddush nifla. Correct? That was the chiddush you spoke out in the dorim. And however, the chacham say it's not mufar. Again, it's a hekesh ishi kimeni yifireno. He can't take it off. Now, kasal kedaitach ki omar Rabbi Yeshia. When Rabbi Yeshia said ishi kimeni ishi yifireno, aliba the rabbanon the army. He was saying the din the rabbanon that lo matzi mefer. So now, v'ilav the amar achmona ishi kimeni ishi yifireno. Apotropis having mefer. So again, we established that what? We established the pasuk that what? That the only reason that the shliach can't do it is because of the akpada of the husband doing it, correct? Yet the husband himself can't do it. So you have a kasha. How can you say that a shlichus has to be, the mishalech has to be able to do something? You see over here, the shliach is able to take it off, if not for a pasuk, and the husband can't. And for the Gemara, the Dilma Aliba Rabbi Eliezer. Maybe Rabbi Yoshi was saying his din according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says the husband could be made for. Guys, if the husband could be made for, your whole thesis, your whole hypothesis goes out the window, because both can do it. Both the Baal can do it, and both the shliach can do it. So in fact, you don't have anything that the shliach can do and the mishalech can't. Because it's not going. The mishalech can't is the shita's chachamim that he's not able to be mefer. The shita of Rabbi Eliezer is he could. So if Rabbi Yoshia said it's in Rabbi Eliezer, you have no kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, right? If that's the case, if he could take it off, why do you have to make a shliach? So Dilma mishtalinon, he'll forget. Or he'll be angry, or he'll be tired. In other words, therefore he made a shliach because for various reasons he may not be able to take it off. Bottom line, let's recap. We began the sugya by saying Rabbi Yochanan's very famous statement of Isha's Mekadesh, a man sends a shliach stam to Mekadesh and Isha, and he dies. Chazaki did a shlichus, a man can't marry anyone else in the world, right? We have a question of Roiv. We had a question of Roiv from birds. That case of birds was what? For the birds, it was a case of what? Of going after Basa the Naidi, finding the meat in the street rather in the Makom Kfua. Anisha is considered Makom Kfua because Kfua melts Panima. We in fact then asked the Kasha from Toisvis, so why can any woman no man in the world should be able to get married after all? Then if Kol Kavua Kamechza Mechza is then Deraisa, and you have a suffix Deraisa, how can any man get married? Maybe this woman too is an Eshes Ish. And the answer is that what? The answer is that, and we say kol kavua only when the issur will be nikab l'fnei atzmai. When it's not nikab l'fnei atzmai, then we don't say the din of kol kavua. Rabbeinu Tam asked the kasha. Tosfos asked the kasha. L'chayra. Rabbeinu Tam, the Tosfos asked the kasha that you shouldn't be able to marry. Forget the kroivim. You shouldn't marry any woman. Any other man should not be able to marry any woman. Tosfos said that it didn't dafka to him and not other people. Then we asked the kasha and go in order. I went out of order. Okay. Bottom line is, Rav said Rabbi Yochanan's Maida that if the woman's kroivim weren't available, either they weren't in the world or they were mekadesh at the time of kiddushin, then you would go ahead and say you'll be able to get married in lemaskana, because any one who's not available at the time of the mini shlichus, the mishaleach cannot go ahead and infuse the shliach with something that he himself can do. So since at the time of the mini shlichus, he couldn't go ahead and marry these women, therefore, if when they are available and he would go ahead and be mekadesh them, it wouldn't be a good kiddushin because he wasn't memunah, he wasn't appointed as a shliach for this case. He wasn't appointed as shliach for this case. And then we ask another kasha, and we'll go weiter. Says the Mishnah. A person says it's upon me to legaleach chatzi nazir, meaning to bring the karbanis of half a nazir. The shama chaver of Oma v'ani olay legaleach chatzi nazir. Zem megaleach nazir shalom, zem megaleach nazir shalom. What went over here? He said he didn't say bring the karbanis, but he said I'll be megaleach chatzi nazir. Chatzi nazir. There's no such thing as a chatzi nazir, right? There's no such thing. You are the full nazir or not a full nazir. So chatzi nazir meant the full, and you're going to have to bring a full set. You can't go ahead and bring half. Divrei Reb Meir, the Chachamim oimrim zeh megaleach chatzi nazir, zeh megaleach chatzi nazir. Each one says half. Okay, now the question is, this is going to be a sugya that we did before. Amar Rava, hakol moedim. There's no machlokes between Reb Meir and the Chachamim. That kol heicha the Amar chatzi karbanas nazir olai. He mentions openly half of the karbanas of a nazir upon me. Chatzi karbanas maisi, right? Karbanas chatzi nazir. Maisi. Karbanas nazir alai chatzi carbon maisi. Karban, that's he says that's karbanas chatzi nazir alai. But if he doesn't say karbanas of half of the karbanas, he brings half. But he says karbanas of a half of nazir. Guys, outside, look at me. I'm repeating. I'm not saying it clearly. In one case, he's saying half of the karbanis. In other words, he's saying the karbanis of half a nazir. If he says the half of karbanis, he brings half the karbanis. If he says the karbanis of half a nazir, then he brings the whole thing. Okay? Says the Gemara. Karbanis chatzi nazir alai kula karban boy. So everyone asuye. My timer the holei ashkin nazirus the palga. So there's no nazirus the palga. So there's no machlokes over there. Kivichi pligi. The lashon of the Mishnah, they argue. Reb Meir Savar, even the Ama Hare Alai, since he said Hare Alai, right? When you say Alai, as soon as you say it upon me, before you said anything else, Achayev Kula, you chayev in everything. Kula Naziris. V'chika Ama Chatzi Naziris, Lav Kol Kamina, because you're Taifus Lashon Rishon. Again, Reb Meir guys throughout is always goes after you go after the first thing the person said. So if he said Harei alai chatzi carbon. Once he said Harei alai, he said the lashon Harei alai legaleach, right? As soon as he said Harei alai legaleach, what did that mean, guys? Taich Harei alai legaleach. I'm gonna bring which karbanis? All of them. Then he says chatzi nazir. Oh, forget that chatzi nazir. We disregard that because we're Taifus Lashon Rishon. Good. And this is what the Chachamim hold. Rabbanan Savi nadar upesachimayhu. This is a nedar with the Pesach with. Taich Kedei Dibur, what did he say? Taich Kedei Dibur, he said, I'm a Nazir. And Taich Kedei Dibur, he said, guess what? And I'm explaining what I meant. I meant af dvar of Adam nitvas, and therefore he would bring what? He have to kabbanas the Nazir. That's the machlokes from the two. The sidistic machlokes that we've had from based upon the Gemara and Tamura. The guy says, Tamura Sayra, Tamura Shlamim, right? Like Rabbi Meir, he brings the Noila, the one he said first. Like the Chachamim, you wait till they graze, you sell it and bring from both. That's the machlokes over here in Nazir. Good tabach. Thanks everyone for listening.